I'm Randall Fegley. I'd like to invite you to join me in exploring a topic that has fascinated me my entire adult life. For over 4 decades, I have been fortunate to have traveled widely throughout the world studying the phenomena of mass trauma. Retiring after 35 years at Pennsylvania State University, I now have time to introduce my findings on a wider level. This video introduces my study, which particularly focuses on local responses to wars, gross human rights violations, and natural disasters. Taking an internationalistic view, as I have throughout my career, I will be posting numerous videos which will feature a variety of traumas and efforts to deal with them. These are intended to be contemplative with a significant amount of on-screen reading. As I post more offerings, I will also include some work done by friends and students, particularly interns I took to Rwanda between 2006 and 2011. At this point in my life, I'm faced with serious health issues, and my voice is often weak. However, I still hope to inspire those who share my passion for making the world a better place. I will happily accept comments to assist me in my ongoing research. Please join me in this very important study. I define mass trauma as being violent and/or long-term conflicts, gross human rights violations, including genocide, and severe, prolonged, or repeated disasters, whether they are generated by nature or humanity. Probably the most obvious is war. In future videos, I will be examining the post-war rebuilding of Ypres in Belgium, Coventry in England, Dresden in Germany, and Hiroshima in Japan. Nuclear weapons brought a fearsome new dimension to war. Human rights violations have also traumatized societies. Genocide is the worst of these. I will be looking in the future at many aspects of this in international law and in actual practice. Extending back into prehistory, slavery has been one of the most continuous traumas. In future presentations, I will be defining and describing it. One of humanity's perennial fears is of disease. This includes plagues and epidemics, such as the Black Death, the Spanish flu, and COVID-19, all of which have changed history. Diseases have come not only in waves, but also as ongoing realities in human societies. Above all, malaria has proved to be an ongoing feature of many societies. In some places, it has been eradicated, in others, it is returning. Over the years, there have been generations of various medications which have proved to be ineffective as the germ grows in its resistance. We are currently on the cusp of seeing the very first workable malaria vaccine. Following this introduction to my channel, the first video I will be posting will be about the English village of Eyam, which resisted a plague in the 17th century and provides many lessons for today. Noted throughout history, fires are another perennial concern of humans, dating back to the Great Fire of Ancient Rome and similar great fires as they're labeled in London and later Chicago. However, our records and memories of disasters are often very selective. One example of this is the Great Peshtigo Fire, which destroyed much of 7 counties in Wisconsin and Michigan. This fire was the worst in American history in terms of property damage and loss of life. However, few people in America know about it because it occurred on the same day as the Great Chicago Fire. Similar biases favoring cities over rural areas are evident throughout history. Floods have been a perennial human concern, and they particularly are evident in zones that are highly populated because they are in very fertile, low-lying areas. Similarly, volcanoes are often in highly populated areas because their soil is so fertile. I will be presenting a study of the many floods that have occurred in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. The most famous was in 1889. However, ones also date back to 1866, and major floods followed in 1936 and 1977. Along with germs, fire, and floods, another set of catastrophes that has often faced human societies has been food shortages. The first really well-studied famine was that which occurred in Ireland at the end of the 1840s. Throughout the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century, India often also suffered from severe famines. By the 20th century, human beings could produce far more food than they could consume. This led to a very different dynamic in the creation of famines, which no longer were the result of weather and other natural phenomena, but became weaponized. Waves of mass starvation were caused by powerful regimes seeking to eliminate those they felt were undesirable. The classic example of this is the famine which occurred in the Ukraine in the early 1930s under Soviet communism. It was one of the worst history has ever seen. At the end of the 1960s, the breakaway region of Biafra in Nigeria was defeated ultimately, but with great loss of life due to famine. It was in fact televised, and it was the first time that people, particularly in the Western world, saw children swollen with disease and famine dying. Just as Vietnam is seen as the first television war, Biafra was the first television famine. In some regions of the world, famine has become an ongoing reality of life. In particular, this is true of Northeast Africa, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Somalia in particular. Earthquakes will feature in my future presentations, in particular ones in Portugal, the United States, and Japan. They are complex traumas, often featuring multiple disasters, including fires, floods, tsunamis, chemical accidents, and nuclear meltdowns. In May of 1970, an earthquake off the coast of Peru generated an avalanche and landslides which destroyed the town of Yungay. Like floods, volcanoes, and earthquakes, hurricanes also occur in only certain zones in the world. I will be studying the one in Galveston, Texas in 1900. Human mistakes have also brought mass traumas. Particularly this was true in the 1980s, with the chemical accident in Bhopal, India, and the nuclear reactor meltdown in Chernobyl in the Ukraine. Landslides are often generated by geophysical activity. However, they can also be generated by human error. This was the case in Aberfan, Wales on the 21st of October 1966, when mounds of refuse from coal mines showered down into the town with disastrous consequences. Explosions are another human-generated trauma. In 1917, an ammunition ship exploded in Halifax, Nova Scotia, destroying almost a third of the city. It was the largest human-generated explosion until the development of nuclear weapons. "30 years later, in Texas City, Texas, ships loaded with fertilizer to aid the reconstruction of post-Second World War Europe exploded and destroyed half of the city. Traumas which affect an entire group or community have special significance. Probably the most obvious is the Holocaust, but there are others as well. Entire localities such as Pompeii in Italy and Yungay in Peru have been profoundly affected and virtually destroyed by particular traumas. The destruction of a specific group in localized disasters also has special significance. For example, all but one fireman was killed in the Texas City explosion, while in Aberfan's landslide, every elementary school student and teacher was killed in the disaster. Given the many past environmental catastrophes and the reality of climate change, it's hard to know what sorts of new traumas lay ahead in the future. This channel will not merely describe mass traumas, but also look at the lessons that were learned from them and how human beings and institutions have coped. Depending on the cataclysmic events suffered, this can take many forms. The actual physical rebuilding of things after wars or natural disasters. This can also include self-help projects which are used to also aid local communities. Legal reforms are also important, stretching from the highest of international laws which are incorporated into national legislation on things such as genocide, all the way down to local communities and changes that are made in local ordinances regarding, for example, building in earthquake zones. Community counseling and group rehabilitation is also important, as are school curricula, examining how the young are taught about the trauma and how this can be used to also heal. Reconciliation bodies are very important in cases of war and human rights violations. Then there's also the official media and what it does to ameliorate or perhaps complicate things. Events and museums, monuments that are used to commemorate international, national, and local traumas are also very important. Academics are often seen as impractical dreamers. However, in this area, they have become important, and their research has led to many new practices and technologies. I will be posting videos about a particular situation or issue every month for the foreseeable future.